So now that we've got our hashed passwords, we have to find a way for a user to authenticate. And again, just to test this out, we're going to focus on the server side here. What I want to do here is I'm going to have a method called authenticate. And I'm going to go with a happy path here, and I'll say the username is going to be Lucy, and the password is going to be Lucy. Right now this method doesn't exist, but we'll end up adding it here. And what we'll end up doing here for the authenticate method is that we're going to first of all see if we could find a user with this username. And then we're going to ask bcrypt and say, hey, look, here's this plain password. Does this end up matching? And if it does, we'll eventually end up creating a token. For now, we're just going to throw an error if it doesn't end up matching. So the way that we're going to end up doing this is let's make this asynchronous. These are going to be our credentials, and let's grab our username and password. And what I want to end up doing here is that I'm going to do another await here. And I'm going to tell my client that I want to query. And this is going to be, I could end up selecting star from users. And we're going to do where username. And equals $1. And this will be our username that we'll end up passing in here. And let's just take this data. We're going to be very optimistic here. Again, if for some reason we don't get a match, it'll throw an exception, which is fine. That's what we want it to do. And this is going to end up being really our user. So just for now here, let's make sure I have this correct. Let's run this. We won't see any error here, and in fact, if we were to console log the user, we would end up seeing that we could end up finding that user based on the username. Just to make this a little bit less noisy here, let's comment this out. Could always put it back in if we want to test something out. And what I want to do here is that I've got this hashed version of the password. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put an await here, and I'm going to have a function called compare. Again, I'm going to wrap around my bcrypt callback, and for the compare method, I'm going to pass an object here. And I'm going to say the plain value here is going to be the password that the user ended up passing in here. And the hashed version is going to be the user's password. And so this compare method doesn't exist yet, but we'll set up this compare method. This compare method is going to end up getting this object, and we could destructure it. So we've got something that's plain, and we've got something that's hashed. We could just log these out just so we could see them. So we've got the plain value and we've got the hash value. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a comparison. I'm going to make this asynchronous. And what I'll end up doing here is I'm going to return, again, another new promise, resolve, reject. And so bcrypt has the ability to compare, to tell you, hey, look, is this plain password, was it used to end up generating this hashed password? And what I'll end up doing here is I'm going to tell bcrypt, which has a compare method, here is the plain version, here's the hashed version, and this ends up giving me either an error or a result. It's important because the result is either going to end up being true or false. I don't expect to get an error here, but what I'll end up doing is I'll just ask the question, hey, if there's an error, and again, I'm not really returning anywhere, but I just want to be done with this callback, and I'll return reject, just so I could see what that error is here. And here I'll say, hey, look, if the result I could just do result, but this will actually give me a Boolean value, and I could even, do this. If the result is true, I just want to say, look, this is great. Otherwise, if I make it down here, and again, I'm going to get out of here. And if I make it down here, I'm just going to reject. And we could end up rejecting with an error, with a message, bad credentials. So let's take a look and see what happens here. And we don't see any error message here, but if we came over here and we decided to try a password of Lucy123, right, we would end up getting this error message, which we're not handling at the moment, that tells us we have bad credentials. Let's switch this back, and let's might as well do one more check, see that we could end up getting this to work with Mo. And so we could see we could authenticate these. Again, if we decided to maybe screw up on the username, right, we end up getting another error, which we'll end up handling at some point as well. So let's actually, what we'll end up doing next is that when we end up authenticating, we'll end up generating a token.